I started this not so good looking ultra budget gaming PC off by buying something that I honestly didn't even know what it was. I saw this CPU, motherboard, and RAM combo sitting on eBay for just $43, and even though the CPU model number wasn't even listed, I knew I had to have it. What was advertised was this Asus P8H61-M motherboard and 8GB of RAM, and since I knew this motherboard supported Intel 2nd or 3rd generation, I was kinda hoping it was something like an i5-3570, and since the buyer did say it was an i5 combo, I thought I had a solid chance. Where things got a little weird though was even though this combo said it was just an 8GB combo, it actually came with 16GB of RAM. This is a 2x8GB kit of DDR3 RAM clocked at 1333 MHz, so we're actually ahead of the game here, especially considering this RAM kit could easily sell on eBay for the entire price of the combo. And as soon as we got this combo to the studio, I immediately had Sam rip off that CPU cooler and check out what the CPU model was, and unfortunately it wasn't what I was hoping for. It was just an i5-2500, but remember, for $43, this combo is still a really good purchase. Once we realized this, there was only one thing left to do, and that's to build an entire gaming PC around the $43 combo and see if we could squeeze out another sub $200 gaming PC. And we're actually quite successful at building a solid gaming PC because this can crank out some seriously good FPS numbers, at least in the easier to run esport titles. But what we also did is buy and activate Windows 10 on here, and of course we use Digital Chillmart to do that. Sticking with the theme of an ultra budget build, Digital Chillmart has your ultra budget Windows 10 and Windows 11 keys, because when you use my code ZTT at checkout, that'll save you 50%, which drops the price of Windows 10 down to just $10. Now you may be rightfully questioning if websites like this even work, but do know that I've seriously bought over 50 keys at this point from this website without a single issue. It's kind of like a secret weapon for us PC flippers to keep those costs down and keep those profits nice and high. Imagine if you had to pay the Windows 11 retail price for a budget build like this. That would almost double the price of the entire thing, so you obviously don't want to do that. Once you buy the code here on Digital Chillmart, it'll instantly send you the code as soon as the payment goes through. That's a free Windows 11 key for one of you viewers to use right now, by the way. And then you just click start on your PC and type in activation, change your product key, paste it in there, and boom, Windows is now activated. Remember to use that code ZTT at checkout. And for today's build, I actually installed Windows on a tiny 240GB 2.5-inch Kingston SSD, but since I found this on eBay for just 15 bucks, I thought it was perfect for a build like this. Usually for budget builds, I'm gonna throw in a 500GB NVMe drive, but since that will jack up our price a bit, and with the fact that our CPU motherboard doesn't even support M.2 NVMe, you gotta go with a 2.5-inch drive for a build like this. Now, since 240GB is certainly not enough storage for most people, I also threw in this WD Blue 500GB HDD that I got for free from a previous Dell Optiplex, which I made a video on, by the way. Those Office OEM PCs usually come with like a 500GB or a 1TB HDD, and instead of just throwing them away and swapping them out for an NVMe drive, save those hard drives for ultra budget builds like this because they're perfect and you essentially get free storage out of it. Our storage combo is now looking like 240GB of SSD space and 500GB of HDD space, all for just $15. That's honestly really good, but let's move on to the PSU where things turn around a little bit. This here is the EVGA 450W3, and yes, I am fully aware that this is a really bad power supply and you should almost never use it. It's rated tier E on the PSU tier list, so I definitely do not recommend it, but since I paid $20 on EVGA B stock for it like 2 years ago, I figured this was finally the time to get rid of it. But if you're doing a fresh build right now, I would try to find something a bit better. Being tier E doesn't necessarily mean that it's gonna blow up instantly or at all, to be honest, but just know that you can get some much more reliable units out there for not that much more money. This thing has been sitting on my shelf for years now, and I simply wanted to clear out some inventory space. Now, one component that I am actually excited for is this case, and if you're in the ZTT Discord server, which is linked down below, by the way, you'll already know all about this. This is the Deepcool Mcube 310, and this has been recently going on sale for $40 and sometimes even $37, which is just absolutely obnoxious value. This isn't even one of those super cheap cases like from DIY PC or some of those other cheaper brands. This is actually a really robust case with plenty of room for fans and cooling, has some very solid cable management options in the back, and it even comes included with a 4-port PWM fan hub. The main reason I chose the Deepcool Mcube 310 outside of it just costing $37 is because it features an extremely tinted and dark side panel, and that's perfect for hiding really ugly looking builds like this. And before you freak out that this isn't an aesthetic build or anything, please remember that this only costs $160. This build is by no means trying to live up to the ZTT aesthetic standard, as you can tell, but I will admit that those $21 Asia Horse white cable extensions weren't added to the final build price. That would cost an extra $21, totaling $181, but those are completely unnecessary and honestly kind of obnoxious in a build like this. The only reason I added them in here was because I can't help myself. But moving on to the final part, we of course have the graphics card, and this here is the Asus Strix GTX 960, which only sports 2 GB of VRAM, but it can still kick it in 2022 with the easier to run games. We'll do a full benchmarking run here soon, but I ended up just paying $45 for this over on eBay, and your options are seriously limited around this price point. Now, to be honest, although this is a decent purchase for $45, that doesn't necessarily mean that I recommend doing it. If you can spend a bit more than that on your graphics card, like $100 or so, then you can get a much better GTX 970 or maybe even a GTX 1060. I would definitely recommend going down that route instead. To keep things as cheap as possible purely for the entertainment value in a video like this, here's what the full parts list is looking like. And as you can see, this is a $160 build before the cable extensions, and I haven't built a custom PC this cheap in a really long time. It's almost not worth it to buy a PC with this low of a budget. Our CPU is literally more than a decade old at this point, but we might as well see what it can do here in 2022, and Sam of course has us covered with the benchmarks. For a PC like this, we're obviously not going to start with the super demanding games. We'll start with titles like Fortnite, and here in 1080p with performance mode, we got an extremely solid 138 FPS average. Grand Theft Auto 5 is also a pretty easy one these days, and in 1080p normal mode, we got 87 FPS. Surprisingly, Apex Legends also looked pretty great because we could still stay in 1080p, and with very low settings, we got well above our target 60 mark with 82. And finally, we did drop down below 1080p to 900p, very low for Call of Duty Vanguard, but even this was a pretty solid gameplay experience with 61 FPS, not bad for a less than $200 build. And just like always, we ran a 3D Mark Time Spy run just so you can see the scores against all my other builds on the channel. Make sure you check out my other $200 PC that I bought from Walmart and upgraded it a few weeks ago. But yeah, this build cranked out a score of 2,297. And just in case those weren't enough benchmarks for you, here's some of the more tougher to run games. And as you can see, we definitely had to drop the resolution down to 720p for a lot of these. It's still nice to see getting over 60 FPS in games like Forza Horizon 5, Borderlands 3, and almost with Assassin's Creed Valhalla. You just gotta remember how cheap this build is, and with the proper expectations, this can certainly get the job done for some of you budget ballers out there. And let me know down in the comment section what you think of this build or what you would do to change it. And then if you are interested in a slightly more expensive build guide, which I actually recommend copying, then feel free to click the video that's on the screen now.